I was working the sales floor at Lumber Liquidators. It was my first commissioned job. I mentioned in an earlier video that I loved that Lumber Liquidators worked as a team to hit goals and be bonused. And I was working in the number one location in the country. A couple came in to go shopping and they decided, or they were telling me about the issues they were having in their home. That was part of our sales process. You know, why did you come shopping for a floor today? What project are you working on? And as they described the situation they were encountering, it was a kitchen floor that they were looking for. They had dogs. It would get wet. The dogs were large, so the floors could get scratched. They wanted something that was going to hold up to the water and the dogs. And I'd heard this story hundreds of times before. And it was number one location. Like, we literally helped hundreds of customers a day. And I jumped right to the flooring section that I thought they should be in, told them why the floors were amazing and how they were going to help them. And my boss was there. I forgot to mention that. The regional VP for the area was in town, and he was in my store. And around that time, he came and asked for me. And knowing that I had these customers in the right area, I called another salesperson over and said, "Hey, help these people. This is what they're looking for." I go and I spend some time with my boss, and I come back out and I ask how it went. I ask what they bought. I ask how much they bought. Turns out they were looking for a couple thousand feet. They wanted to do their whole main level, not just the kitchen, which was awesome. And it turns out they didn't buy from us. I was like, "What do you mean? What do you mean they didn't buy? Like, we nailed it. Like, this is the flooring they needed. This is the flooring they wanted." And the feedback that the other salesperson gave, which was one of my assistant managers, was, "Well, Jeff, they said you didn't listen to what they were looking for, and where you showed them was not what they were looking for." Whoo, that was a tough one to hear, especially for several thousand feet. And flooring could be, from $2 to $8 a square, depending on what type of flooring they were buying. So we were talking about potentially a $15,000 to $20,000 deal. I don't know if they had installers. It could have been more than that. So pretty big thing to kind of punch me in the gut. And I realized that they were right, though. I have helped so many people with flooring that I was jumping to the prescription before I even finished diagnosing. Have you ever gone to the doctors, maybe a prompt care, patient first type situation, gone in, sat down with the doctor, waited for an hour for the doctor to show up? He or she walks into the room and looks at you, asks you a couple of questions, and after a couple of questions, writes out a prescription and says, "Here, go get this filled. You should be feeling better in the next 48 to 72 hours. And walks out of the room. You got all of 2 minutes, 3 minutes with the doctor. And you may have gone and gotten the prescription filled, but the whole time you're sitting there wondering, did they diagnose me correctly? Like, they didn't even take my temperature. Like I don't understand what's going on. I don't know if they did it right. I don't feel comfortable with this. I'm a little angry at the doctor. I waited so long and I got so little time." And whether you got better or not doesn't change the fact that you were uneasy and you did not trust that situation because the trust wasn't built. That's what happens when we listen with our autobiographical listening skills. That's where we're evaluating, we're probing, we're advising, and we're interpreting based on our own experiences. I actually wrote a post in a coaching group yesterday on this. Like, we can walk a mile in somebody else's shoes, quote unquote, by listening to them tell their story and learn everything it is that they want to tell us about themselves. But the fact is, it's still our life experiences that are a filter on top of that situation. And when we take our life experiences and put that filter on top of another situation, there's bias and there's interpretation that occurs. So how do we seek first to understand when we know that that's the problem, when we know that that's what happens? In the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he actually breaks down a conversation between a father and a son. And initially, just the conversation, and then the father's interpretation of the conversation, and then the son's interpretation of the conversation. I thought it was really rather neat. And it's like 6 pages, so we're not going to go deep into that conversation today. Check it out in the book if you haven't picked it up yet. And just to go into that briefly, and it goes a little bit into the sales story that we just mentioned, is that when you ask questions, you wait and you listen to the answer. And then I've gone into this with the word dog before on these videos, right? Like when I think of a dog, I think of my chocolate lab or my labradoodle. When you think of a dog, you probably get a much different picture in your head. So defining what that picture is a big part of listening with empathy and empathetic listening. So as you listen, ask questions for further definition. So when somebody says to you, "Oh, I'm really frustrated," what does frustration mean to you? "Oh, I'm really sad." Why are you sad? What happened to make you sad? So as we ask those probing questions, don't evaluate, don't agree or disagree, don't give your opinions on top of it, don't advise. They're not asking you for advice. There's no asking for advice when they told you they were frustrated. We're going to have a tough time not interpreting. So ask those clarifying questions, label the situation. Chris Voss goes into labeling and Never Split the Difference as a book. He really talks about labeling and repeating the content back. So when you say this, did you mean this? So I'm taking it to mean that you are frustrated. I'm taking this to mean that when this happened and this happened and this happened, this is how you felt. And then allow them the opportunity to correct you. Yes, you nailed it. In fact, I've often coached business clients that were going into negotiation, especially using this Chris Voss technique, that when they get down to the end, they should hear somebody say the words, "That's right." And if you haven't gotten to a "that's right," if you're just hearing the one word yes, no, maybes, you haven't dug deep enough to really determine where it is that they're coming from. They don't feel yet that you understand them. Psychologically, they will get to a point where they say, "Jeff, that's right, you nailed it." And when we get to that point, we know that we've dug deep enough and gotten to the core. Michael Bungay-Stanier, I don't know if I said that right, but he wrote the coach approach, actually goes into a question in the coach approach that he calls the "all" question, the "and what else." So if you find that you're listening to somebody and you don't know what question to ask back, the appropriate question is also, "And what else? And what else? And what else? Tell me more. And what else?" This takes time. It's kind of like peeling back the layers of an onion. You're not going to get it perfect every time. It's practice, and you don't know how many layers are in that onion that you're peeling back. You might have to go pretty deep. Remember, it's seek first to understand and then to be understood. Seeking first to understand is the first step in thinking win-win, which was habit 4. We're in habit 5. So it's think win-win and then seek first to understand, right? In order to get a win-win scenario, you have to seek first to understand. Thinking it, remember that first creation and then creating it. Think win-win, seek first to understand, and then be understood. Once you understand somebody, it is much easier to put into context what it is that you would be presenting back. If you don't have an understanding of where they're coming from, a clear understanding, that's right scenario, it's impossible to put it into the appropriate context. You could still, get it right, stumble across it. Maybe they'll be forgiving and give you a chance anyway. But better yet, let's really make sure that we understand. So the challenge listed in the book for this week I thought was a good one. And that was to share with somebody else in your life that you are working to practice empathetic listening. So let them know what empathetic listening means, and then ask them to give you feedback after a week. So they'll watch you for a whole week as you practice empathetic listening, and then afterwards give you feedback. I thought that was a pretty neat challenge. Moving on to habit number 6 tomorrow. Thank you all. Talk to you then.